Water is really important, and there's a lot of inaccurate information out there that doesn't address the reality of what's going on with our water supply. If you're out in the wild, you can't just throw a bunch of grass in a tube and put some charcoal in it and expect to be okay. Cryptosporidium, Giardia, E. coli, all kinds of not only biological contaminants, but chemical contaminants will get through those filters. Just because it's running water doesn't mean it's clean water. All that means is those contaminants are going past you really, really fast at a constant rate. All right? Just because somebody claims to come from an expert village and share inaccurate water information with you doesn't mean that you get yourself stuck with a bad case of the Hershey squirts. You have to understand that drinking water, bad water, can dehydrate you quickly, more quickly than you can put more of that bad water back into your system, and it is debilitating.
Sphagnum moss can absorb more than twice as much as cotton. The tannic acid and sphagnol contained in this natural sponge make it an inhospitable environment for bacteria. Thistle is an excellent plant source of water. Be careful to shave the spines with a rock or a knife before chewing the roughage and sucking out the moisture, then spit out the undigestible cellulose. Collecting dew is a fast way to gather a lot of distilled water right from the landscape. One of the most efficient methods is to tie your shirt sleeves around your ankle and walk through thick vegetation before wringing it into your mouth or a container. Make sure the shirt is cotton, and also be sure that the area isn't sprayed. You should know the water will be the color of the t-shirt you use.
There are other sources of water. In the plant communities we have, there are wild grapes, which are lianas, which don't die back over the year like vines do. You would find the base of those lianas, those woody bark, shredded bark looking types of vine-like structures. Cut them about 2 feet up from the ground, bend that into your water gathering container, right? And allow that to drip and fill that container. In the springtime, when the sap is running, you could get a gallon easily within 2 days. However, this time of year, August, the bark's getting tight on the trees, the water isn't flowing as quickly as it might. You'd be lucky to get a few ounces of water. Be mindful that the time of year dictates how effective cutting these lianas or tapping trees is going to be. In Maine, we're limited to tapping only a handful of trees. Specifically, we want to tap maples and birches. We don't have the sycamores that exist down south that you can tap year-round and get good results. So, know your tree species and know what they can provide for you. When we look at transpiration bags, we're looking at capturing the escaping water from the stomata of plants that are breathing. As they breathe and exhale, they release moisture, just like we do. Now you have to know that when you put a bag over a plant, whatever you cover is going to be killed. So when you approach it in a non-survival situation, or even in a survival situation where you're at peace and not panicking, put those bags over the tree branches as if you were going to prune them. That way, when you're done, you're not destroying an entire shrub. You're actually leaving it healthier than it was before. As far as solar stills go, digging a big hole and then stretching a piece of clear plastic over it with a container in the center and a rock on top, making sure that nothing can escape by mounding dirt in a ring around that hole so that the tarp is tight and enclosing that space. Heck, you could even put vegetation and dead animals in there and run a surgical tube between the tarp and the soil and down into that container. We've done all of that. In fact, we've done it well over 15 times in different types of conditions. And maybe it's just the state of Maine or our position on the globe, or maybe we're missing some important element, but we haven't gotten it to work worth its while. If you want to dig a 4x4x4 pit and stretch a piece of plastic over it to get nothing more than a bottle cap worth of water, by all means have at it. Or, more importantly, if you figured out how to make it work so it's worth your while, let us know not only how you did it, but where you're located. Maybe you're equatorial or near the Arctic Circle and it has something to do with the length of day or the angle of the sun. When dealing with water purification, there are two major types of contaminants that we're going to have to address. The first, more common contamination, is biological contaminants. These include viruses and bacteria. Now, there are water purification tablets. People see these on the shelves all the time. Usually they're iodine based or bleach based, but water purification tablets don't address the more insidious types of Cryptosporidium, or bacteria that have like a shell around them. We call them cysts. These shells are often impervious to these types of water purification methods. More effective are pumps. These pumps are either ceramic, charcoal, or both. Pure is one of the more reliable filtration systems. And what happens is you take a pump and you put a little bobber in the water and allow it to float above the sediment and just start pumping away, and it draws the water through a piece of surgical tubing. And in this case we have a little adapter so it fits on your Nalgene bottle and comes up through, draws through the ceramic and charcoal filters, and then starts to drip out into your Nalgene bottle. If you get a pump, you want a pump that is good to 0.3 microns. Anything larger, you're going to run the risk of certain nasty, smaller zoological bugs, if you will, getting into your intestines and wreaking havoc. The danger of having a biological contaminant inside of you is that they breed rapidly and your body tries to purge them out, and you will dehydrate from drinking bad water. So what do we do in a primitive situation? You want to get a fire going. You want to boil all of your water to a rolling boil. Now in the old days it was 30 minutes and they pared it down to 15 minutes, and now Red Cross states just bring it to a rolling boil. It's kind of old school, so if I'm going to make a water container, like taking a piece of pine bark and folding the corners 45 degrees and then folding them again to make a watertight box, I want that to be boiling for at least 3 to 5 minutes just to ensure that everything is dead.
One more?
And that's how you deal with biological contaminants. The other type of contamination is a little trickier, and that's chemical contamination. And for our purposes, there are roughly 2 types of chemicals you need to be aware of. Chemicals that are lighter than water, that evaporate off first, and then heavy contaminants, chemicals that after you boil your water, there's a lot of water converting into steam and being evaporated, which concentrates or causes a ratio of contaminants to water to be more harmful. To have knowledge of your area and be mindful of where you're gathering from. You do not want to gather from areas that run off power lines or farm fields. These areas are chock full of herbicides and pesticides, and while it may seem like a small layer of herbicide is being sprayed across those crops, when it rains, all of that runoff concentrates into those little pastoral country streams that look so quaint and nice. It's all about risk. Do you want to die of dehydration, or do you want to take the risk of ingesting some heavy contaminants and see another day and maybe go to a doctor or have some type of cleansing regimen go on? I know which one I'm going to pick. This device is called a SteriPen. It's based on the same technologies as you would putting a bottle of water up on a roof and allowing the sun to use its ultraviolet rays. It's a little flashlight that has contacts. You put it into your Nalgene bottle, and when the contacts create a circuit, the light goes on, and you can set it. You can set the timer for how much water you're going to try to sterilize. It's important to note, though, if you can't see your hand through that container, even if it's just the shadow of your hand, then the ultraviolet light isn't going to penetrate all of that water and get to all of those critters and kill them. Another filtration trend is survival straws. They are pretty reliable. I've tested them in farm ponds and places where I knew I was going to get sick if it didn't work, and I didn't get sick. So either I've built up an immunity to the E. coli in the area, or this works. So I'm going to go with this works, because I tried it in many different places just to try to rule out the idea that I built up that immunity. For long-term survival, we go and dig clay along the Kennebec River and make canteens for water storage. You could also take a gourd, cut a ring where it's the most narrow, and flip that ring upside down so you have a reinforced rim for your canteen, and then take that cap that's left over and just line it with beeswax so that it makes a nice tight seal. These canteens, these gourd canteens, are only going to last for a season.